Kunyara kwacho.
Yes, we can hear you this.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need anything from me now, right? Because we are on the sick.
Hi, Asipe and everybody else. Asipe, I'm having a typical South African issue of, can you hear me? Asipe?
Hi, Sue. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that
Hi.
Asipe?
Should we start? Are you sorted?
Asipe, yeah, I'm having a typical South African problem of connectivity and stuff. So I'm just changing over from one whatever source to another. I'm just putting my phone on a hotspot. So I'll be gone for 1 minute. You can do the introductions. I promise you I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. We didn't hear you, but you can just send me a text now. I think your connection is breaking.
Can't hear you. This is not good.
Hi.
Yes,
I'm just
I can hear you.
Can you please speak so that I can hear?
Can you hear me now?
You're breaking a bit, Sue.
Oh, darn it. Just because my phone is my hotspot. You can't hear me? Damn it. Hello.
Hi, Sue.
Hi.
We
Apparently
can hear you.
apparently other people can hear me clearly. It's just on your side.
Okay, we're about to start. We can hear you now and we can see you in the venue. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us again today. And a warm welcome to those who are joining us for the very first time in today's workshop, which will be dealing with how to dissect and also read a journal article. Just before moving on to our presenter for the day, a bit of housekeeping. There's a register that's roaming around. Please make sure that you sign that, especially those who are doing an accredited course. Make sure that you sign that. Also, those who cannot access the course link, please email me as soon as possible so that we can link you with my colleague here and Neil to add you to the course and make sure that you are connected. We've received so much information on the post. Please let this be an encouragement that you keep on posting on the forum post and stay engaged. And today we are joined by the one and only Professor Sue McKenna, who prefers to be called Sue. She is the director of the Center for Postgraduate Studies. She just returned from her sick leave, and this is the present that she brought to us today. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Asipe. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. I'm hoping that the technology is going to hold. And I'm hoping you can now see my screen.
Hi, Sue. We can see your screen. Just to make sure that you are connected, it's best if maybe you can switch off your video briefly because
I will
it's
do
been.
that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I will do that right now. You've all seen that I exist. I am not Chat GPT. I am a real person. And I'm going to be chatting with you for the next hour and a half. And Asipe, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box. So if you on your end or anyone else who's joining us from wherever, if any of you have problems with hearing or you have questions as I go, feel free to just shove them into that chat box. What I'm going to do today in the next hour and a half is run through a workshop which actually takes a full day. We are still hoping to offer it as a full day workshop later in the year, but to be part of this orientation course, we're going to offer this very rushed version of the workshop in an hour and a half. But all the way through, I'm going to be pointing you to additional materials that will help you go through this workshop in a bit more detail, because it's a practice workshop. And by me rushing through it today, I'm probably not going to do justice to the extent to which you actually need to practice the kind of skills that I'm going to talk to you about today. They are practices. You've got to keep trying them out. You get better and better at them as you go. So I'm hoping that you are all able to just make notes for yourself of things that you want to try out later, and make note of some of the materials I'll point you to. But having said that, I will try and pause every now and again to get you guys to look at the journal articles that hopefully you've got in front of you from your own course, your own topic. If you didn't bring one, you can quickly Google one when I first call for you to do that. But so I will try and pause to make it a little bit interactive for you to sort of see how what I'm saying might look, what it might look like in your field, in your discipline, and with the readings that you're engaging with. So I'm beginning really with an apology for going through things pretty quickly for the next hour and a half. The first thing I want to do, that's interesting. The first thing I want to do is to urge all of you to go onto the RU Connected site for this course. And if you haven't signed up, there is the URL at the top, tinyurl.com/CPGS 2023 in capitals. And you can just self-enroll in the course. The course online is mainly just a set of videos and materials for you to watch and rewatch and work through in your own pace. I only discovered today that one of the videos in week 1, they actually had the wrong video link. And so I urge you to go back. In week 1, you will find this video that you see on your screen now. And whether you're in the natural sciences, humanities, or social sciences, the bottom line is that most of the examination is going to be in the form of a written text that you will have to write a dissertation or thesis. And so it's really important from the very beginning of your journey that you write regularly, because writing is a matter of practice. None of us are born being able to write in chemistry or physics or philosophy or history. This is not a sort of innate skill. Unfortunately, many students think it's an innate skill. So I often hear students saying,
Hi, Sue. I'm really sorry to
hi.
disturb you. It seems
Yes.
like the sound is a little bit off this side. Can you please pause for about 2 minutes?
Okay.
1 minute.
Sure. In the meantime, let me hear from others who are online. I'm hoping you can all hear. I'm hoping it's just those in the venue that are battling. Maybe someone can pop a message in the chat bar to let me know while they sort out. Thanks. Thanks, Gladys, Hillary, Jessica. Great. We're just going to wait for them to try and fix it in the venue. Okay, we're just waiting. Hopefully they're sorting out the sound problem in the venue, because I know some people are sitting in the lecture theatre together, which is lovely because you actually get to interact with humans face to face. But if the technology doesn't work, then it's a problem. So we'll just have to be patient. Let me just WhatsApp a CP and see what's happening. Oh, patience is not my strong suit, unfortunately. I'm meant to be learning to be more patient, but okay. Apparently they're switching laptops in the venue, so that's the delay. But seeing as others of you are sitting on your computers wherever you may be, let's just chat to each other in the chat bar. Maybe you can tell me in a sentence or two what your gut reaction is when I say to you that you've got to do academic readings, and what is your gut reaction when you think about the academic writing you've got to do? What is your sort of emotional reaction to the idea of academic reading and writing? Not your very logical, intellectual response. What is your gut response? Sweat. Yeah. Hard work. Yeah. Sweat and flop sounds like hard work. And then we've got these, and headache. And then we've got these words: fear, anxiety, imposter syndrome, unsure, quite a lot of emotional stuff tied up with writing. Hillary saying, I'm excited to read, but not to write papers. Yeah, I think you're talking to me there, Hillary. I'm exactly the same. I love reading stuff. And of course, I've been doing it for many, many years. So the reading comes more easily to me, perhaps, when I'm reading in my field. It becomes hard when you read in a new field again. But the writing is something that I've learned some tricks, which I'd like to share. But it's the writing that I often put off. Sure, says Warder. Sleepless long nights. Yeah, it takes time, you know. Time. Writing takes time. And I think we trained at undergraduate level to think about writing as something you do as soon as something's due. You know, so, oh, I've got an essay due on Friday, so Thursday night I write the essay. Well, certainly that's how I got through my undergraduate degree. And so I think when we get into postgraduate, where writing is really the space in which we have to present our argument, present our work. It's not just, look, I've done the readings and I understand them, which is a lot of the writing at undergraduate level. You know, I don't think it should be like this, but I do think it is like this. A lot of undergraduate writing is, look, I've done the work. I've got the points. I get it. I can summarize it. I can show you that I've done the work. And a postgraduate level is a whole different thing. Suddenly you're writing to make your own arguments, build your own perspective, add your own contribution. And that takes time. That's not something you do on a Thursday night due on Friday. That takes lots of writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. So the video that I've got on the screen, which is called Just Write, it's in week 1 of the course. As I say, unfortunately, the wrong video was loaded there, but I've loaded the right one now. So I really urge you to make a note for yourself to say, you know, I'm going to go back later today or tomorrow and go through, watch that video. I think I'm biased, but I think it's got some really good support ideas of things you can do.
So we can hear you now.
Writing. Okay, great. Well, I was just jabbering away, as you know, I always do. Hopefully everyone in the venue can hear me now. I know that the people online can hear me. So let's get started again. We were just talking online about some of the emotions attached to academic reading and writing and how sometimes it can feel very daunting. I was saying, you know, I'm much older than all of you. I've been doing this academic reading and writing for many, 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 many years. So it's less daunting. I don't think it comes easily to anyone, but I know what I need to do. The moment I move into a new field or a new theory, believe you me, it gets daunting again. But at least I know, and I'm hoping that you will believe me when I tell you that it's a practice. So when I get a bit daunted, I get some new concepts, new theories, and reading in a new area, and I feel like I don't understand any of this, I no longer feel imposter syndrome or scared. Instead, I go, oh yeah, this is because it's a new area. And I'm going to have to read this a few times and read around it. And it's going to take time. But very importantly, I've learned about the relationship between reading and writing and the need to write often. And I want to speak quickly to the natural scientists who often will have in their schedule with their milestones for their masters or PhDs, they'll have, this experiment or this and do that, or this field work or data collection, analysis, whatever it might be. And then at the end of their list, it'll have like 3 months at the end, it'll say writing up, as if you don't need to read and write until the very end. And I think in some ways that's true, because in the natural sciences, a lot of the knowledge is made in the field or in the laboratory, and the bulk of the writing is reporting on that, which happens at the end after you've done all that work. But I really want to urge you that if you don't make it a daily habit to read and write all the way through your postgraduate journey, when you hit that idea of writing up, you're going to be trying to take on a practice which is brand new. And I wouldn't like any of you to try and go and run 21 kilometers if you haven't done months and months of training. It's exactly the same. So please do go to that video, Just Right. Gives you some really good ideas, I think, of the kinds of practices that you can put in place to become a good writer. Okay, moving along. What I'm going to be talking about mainly today is how to read a journal article, taking you step by step. I think that a lot of what I'm going to say may be very obvious, especially the people who are PhD students or postdocs. So bear with me, because they're not obvious to everybody. And the honest people in the room may find that some of what I say is they're hearing it for the first time. Ideally, you would have learned all of this stuff during your undergraduate, but I certainly did not learn it in my undergraduate. I had to learn this stuff through trial and error. And so will you. Even after this workshop, I'm hoping I can give you a few ideas and a few practices you can put in place, but you're also going to have to make a lot of messes along the way. Messes with reading, misunderstanding, messes with your writing. If you're not willing to write a lot of nonsense, you will never write anything good. You can't sit down and write something good. I've really learned that to myself. I've got to sit down and write down my ideas before I can craft them into something meaningful for someone else. So the only way to good writing is through bad writing. You want to get to that end point of good writing, you've got to go through the bad writing, and linked to that bad writing is lots and lots of reading. At postgraduate level, you're joining a conversation that has existed before you, a conversation in the field. You might just be adding one little brick to the wall that's being built in your field, or you might be bashing down the whole wall and suggesting a different wall needs to be built. Whether you are critiquing the field and their way of doing it, or you're just adding your bit of data and your findings to the field, whatever you're doing, you are joining a conversation that already exists. There is already a group of, a group of literature on the concepts, on the methods, on the topic that you're writing about. And so you need to become familiar with those. You need to, you need to become familiar with that. You need to be conversant with the conversation, because you are now entering the realms. You are novice researchers. You're walking into a room where the experienced researchers are busy having drinks and chatting to each other, and you now joining that conversation. You don't want to walk in and you know nothing about what they're talking about. And the way to find out what they're talking about is to read and read and read. What are the current concepts? What are the current methods? What are the current debates? And so you need to do a heck of a lot of reading before you can really hope to write a thesis that can contribute anything meaningful. And a lot of your reading is just figuring out that conversation, figuring out what the heck are these people talking about? What does this word mean? And so on and so forth. But some of the reading is at what I call a meta level, where you're trying to figure out, how do people write in our field? And as you read lots of articles, you'll even get a sense of, I really enjoyed this article or hated this article. I think this guy writes really badly. And when you find articles that you enjoy, take the time to do what I'm going to tell you about today, which is a meta reading, which is where you unpick an article to figure out how it was put together by the author. And that way you start to learn about how academic writing works in your field. I can't teach you how academic writing works in your field because I don't understand physics. And physics people write differently. So I can't teach you how to write physics. And I don't understand chemistry, and chemistry people write differently. So I can't teach you how to write chemistry, and so on and so forth. So all I can do is suggest activities which will allow you to figure out how people write in your field. Let's get going with some of these activities. So the first thing you've got to do is decide what you're going to spend your time reading. And you want to read stuff that is credible in your field. I'm not saying that you can't get ideas and concepts from Twitter and Instagram and the internet and newspaper articles. Read and learn from wherever you can. But the thing about academic writing, and when you're reading, you'll notice this, is that people build their contribution, and every journal article is a contribution, every thesis is a contribution. They build their contribution by showing what other people are saying before them, by showing what's happening in the field before they then explain what they are offering. So when they have all these references to what they've been reading, and when you're writing, you'll have all the references to what you've been reading, you want to make sure that those references are credible. You don't want to have people say, she's basing her arguments on like what some arbitrary people said on social media. When we have arguments in real life on Twitter or whatever, when we debate with people, we can draw on evidence from anywhere. I can say, well, my aunt told me, or my uncle works in this hospital and he saw. You can do a lot of anecdotal, gossipy kind of evidence for what you want to say. In academic writing, you can't do that. You want to make sure that every time you give a reference, it's a strong, powerful reference that all the other people, all the experienced people in the field will go, oh, right, okay. So this person, this novice researcher, this master's student or PhD student or whatever you are, they are drawing on the work of X and Y and Z to be able to say what they're saying. So it's got to be credible. And basically in academia, credible means peer-reviewed. So you want to find articles that are in established journals, and you want to find, and so you'll use the databases in the library to get to those. And you'll have a session tomorrow, lunchtime, on how to use the databases in the library on campus and off campus. Typically, you want to make sure they're recent. If you're using an article, if all your references are from 1980 Futsack, then there's kind of sense of, yeah, but conversation in the field has moved on. Why is she drawing on all these references from stuff that was the ideas that we've moved beyond that? Fields move forward. Some move forward so quickly, like in IT and computer science, that your references need to be like 6 months old, maybe a year old, depending on your specific topic. In other fields, the field moves more slowly, and you may well find yourself referencing articles that are 10 years old or 15 years old. Generally speaking, the exception to this rule of recent, there isn't one rule that your references have to be less than 5 years or less than 10 years. You can have references from wherever you like and as old as you like, as long as they are doing the powerful work of supporting your claim. And if you're using dodgy references that won't be taken seriously, then it's not going to do the powerful work. So you want good, strong references. You want to be reading stuff that's good and strong, and it's going to inform you of the conversations at the absolute frontiers of the field now. The exception to that is what we call the sort of seminal texts. In every field, there'll be some theories that have stood the test of time, some theorists who are still being referenced. In my own field, we still reference Dewey, we reference There's lots of I was going to say dead white guys, but it's broader than that. But given the history of the Western canon, which still dominates a lot of our seminal texts, not all, a lot of our seminal texts are dead white guys. But there's no problem with referencing a text from 1900 if it's a seminal text, but it can't just be some arbitrary little article. So peer reviewed is key. Wikipedia is great, by the way. As soon as I come across a new concept, a new idea, a new theorist, Wikipedia is my go-to place. I think it's the best example of citizen science that we have in the world. It's made by people, for people, and it is very rigorous, actually. It's as soon as there's errors on Wikipedia, they get addressed almost immediately. And you can go to the back pages of Wikipedia to see the debates between the editors as they put together the pages. So Wikipedia is a fantastic resource. Use it. Go to Wikipedia. Every time you get a new concept, a new idea, a new strategy, a new method, see if there's a Wikipedia page for it. Read it. I found it really useful. Generally, I don't reference Wikipedia because although it's great example of citizen science, it hasn't gone through the double-blind peer review, which is considered the kind of gold standard for a strong, credible reference. I'm not saying I would never reference Wikipedia, but it's unlikely to be my go-to reference. Tomorrow, you're going to have the session with the librarians. Please, if you're going to look on Google Scholar for articles, don't just go to Google Scholar like if you're off campus. If you're on campus and you go to Google Scholar, you will automatically go through the library and you'll get the full texts wherever we've paid for them. But our library and other libraries and universities around the world pay millions and millions of rands to give you access to full texts of many databases. And if you go onto Google Scholar, if you're off campus and you go onto Google Scholar, just straight, just go Google Scholar and you start searching for something, most of those articles, you'll see the heading, you'll see the title, you'll see the abstract, but you won't be able to access the full article. Whereas if you go through the library and you log in through the library, as they'll show you tomorrow, and then you go to Google Scholar through our library website, and then you search, you will have access to the full article of many, 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 many more articles. So don't just do Google Scholar off campus without going through the library. They'll show you tomorrow. The next thing is read the abstract before you download. It's very tempting when you do a search and you put in your keywords and you find 350 articles and you right-click save, right-click save, right-click save, right-click save, and then you walk out the library or out of, you get up from your computer and you say, wow, I've worked so hard today. I've downloaded 57 articles. But if you haven't engaged with any of them, I'm afraid to say you've done some technical work. You haven't done any intellectual work, and it doesn't count. So that's why I make it a rule for myself that when I do a search, I first read the title to see if that looks interesting, and then I read the abstract. And it's only after I've read the full abstract, which is a summary of the text, that I decide, yes, this is something worth downloading. So then at least I've done a little bit of engagement with the text before I hit download. Unfortunately, download isn't reading, even though we all sometimes con ourselves that it is. Save your files. These are simple things that may seem obvious to you, but don't be in the habit of saving everything to your desktop or to a memory stick or in random places. Have a system. Choose what system works for you, whether you put it straight into your citation software, Zotero, RefWorks, whatever, or whether you put it in different folders on different topics. Whatever you do, save your files in sensible places and give them a sensible name. Just have a look at this example here of articles that I've downloaded. You see this one here, Color 76P12GH. You know how when you download it, it often just gives it some random name. That is important that you just straight away right click on that and give it a name that's meaningful for you. So as you can see, what I normally do is I use the surname of the authors, the year, and then maybe a little description of the title or what it is. That's my simple system. You might choose another system. But these are all tiny, pernickety little things that will make your life easier when you start to manage hundreds and hundreds of texts. Another very useful video that I really urge all of you to look at is this one, which is also in week 1, and it's about keeping a reading journal. I won't discuss it in depth now, we don't have time, but please do go and find this video and watch this video. And it talks about the need to write your own, almost a diary, notes to yourself about what you've read, notes about what you want to follow up on, what your reaction was, what was useful, what you might want to draw on. Even if you never read those notes again, there's this weird phenomenon that when you take a reading and you've done a reading and you write your own notes to yourself about that reading, it becomes, you then own that reading, you own that knowledge. You've made the transition from being a kind of consumer of the article to actually being a member of the field, and you're participating in a conversation. So you've read what the author said, and then you've written notes to yourself. I urge you to watch that video. Right, let's move on a little bit more to this idea of a meta-level reading, where you're kind of doing a forensic analysis of a reading. When you come across a reading that you really enjoyed, give yourself a few hours to follow the steps that I'm going to take you through now, and you will actually learn a lot about writing in your field by doing this. Obviously, I would first read it for my own understanding of the content, and then I'd put an entry in my reading journal. But now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this meta reading, meta level reading, forensic analysis, trying to make sense of how this journal article was put together. And by cracking the code, however you want to say it, by unpicking the journal article, maybe I can learn a few things about how I myself might write a journal article, or indeed write chapters for my thesis. So let's start off with the title. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes so that you're not just listening to me raving on. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to chat to the person next to you, and the people that are online, I'm going to ask you to use the chat bar. And what I want you to do is firstly take a minute on your own to read the title or titles of the articles you've brought with you. And just have a look at those titles. How are they put together? What information is included? What might be missing? What titles are interesting to you and why? Which title is better if you've got 2 articles? Which one do you prefer? Just have a little think about the titles, just the titles of the articles you have in front of you, and then have just a 5-minute chat to the person next to you, or in the case of the online people, chat in the chat bar. Tell us about the titles. Are they good? Do they work? Do you like them? Do you hate them? What's going on with the titles? I'm going to be quiet 5 minutes starting now. Okay, everyone. Asipe, I wonder if you can get everyone in the room to stop their chatting. I know it's rude when I suddenly interrupt a lovely conversation taking place, but we will go back to chatting some more later. Is it okay, Asipe? Is everyone back on track?
Yes, so it's kind of side.
Thank you. Okay, so title, hopefully you had a good conversation. I'm sure you noted from the people sitting around you that titles look very, very different in different fields. And so in many fields of the natural sciences, the title will be a very objective reporting of what the study is about. And in some fields in social sciences, there'll be often kind of a more catchy, provocative, maybe a quote from the data or something a bit funny or clever, followed by some kind of outline on what the topic is. And I guess it's up to you. Some of it's personal preference, some of it's disciplinary difference. But certainly, you know, if you suddenly started writing titles that were completely avant-garde, completely different from anything in the field, you'd have to think very carefully about where the article could be sent for publication, because most disciplines have kind of got norms about how the titles work. And what we want from a title is we want to have a sense of what the article's about. As I said to you, before you download the article, you're going to go and read the abstract before you download, so that you're not just downloading random articles. So you are going to read the abstract, and the abstract is going to provide you with more information, but you'd like to have a sense from the title of what it's about. And so sometimes there's a bit of a balancing act. And I'm talking particularly here about social sciencey fields, where sometimes you get abstracts that are, titles that are very cute and clever, but perhaps not very clear. My very, very, very first publication, and I won't tell you when that was because most of you in the room were not born yet, but my very, very first academic publication was called "They Call Us Like Chickens," which was a data quote from one of my participants. They call us like chickens. And I think it's quite catchy, it's quite interesting, but it really didn't say what the article was about, which was about miscommunications between isiZulu speakers, students, and English-speaking lecturers. I just needed to have a little bit more in the title. So I think that the title remains quite fun and interesting and provocative. They call us like chickens, but really it's a useless title because it doesn't tell me what the article's about. So you do want some kind of clarity, even if you are going to have something that's interesting to start it. How much information is like, and what is most likely to make your reader want to read more? If it's vague, and I'm going to quickly, if Sibasiso doesn't mind, she gave me an example. I'm going to quickly look through the chat. One of the examples that we discussed in the chat was from Sibasiso, and she had the example of a title, "Qualitative Study of Leadership Behavior." And that's fine. It tells us it's about leadership behavior. It tells us it's a qualitative study. So it's a very informative title, but I'm sure there must be hundreds of qualitative studies on leadership behavior. So I would like something that's a little bit more precise, a little bit more, this is exactly what this article is going to offer you. There's hundreds of qualitative studies on leadership behavior. This one talks about the need for bravery, qualitative, whatever it might be. So how do you choose where to waste your time, or hopefully not waste your time? How do you choose which to continue reading? What titles are going to be catchy and useful, and what are the norms of titles in your field? Let's move on. The next thing we get is an abstract. Now, the abstract, in almost, but not all cases, but in almost every case, there's then an abstract. There are a few exceptions to this, and often, for example, book chapters, academic book chapters don't have abstracts always. They often don't, but most journal articles will have an abstract. The abstract takes very different forms in different fields again. In my own field, it's usually a paragraph. In many fields, it'll be actually kind of a sentence for each. So it might say introduction, literature review, method, finally. So it'll have almost the same headings as the full article and just give you a sentence or two under each. So the structure again will look different, but an abstract should give you an overview of the full article. It's not the same as the blurb on the back of a book. You know, when you're picking up a novel and you're thinking about buying it, and especially if it's a detective story, for example, if you read the back, it'll say, oh, you know, she was alone at night and there was a loud noise and then the worst ever happened. You know, so it leaves you like a cliffhanger that you've got to read the book to find out. No, this is not a cliffhanger at the end of an episode of some kind of soapy. An abstract is a summary of the entire thing. It doesn't just tell us what you did, it tells us what you found. It tells us, what does this article contribute to the conversation? So it tells us what conversation it's contributing to, and it tells you what the contribution is. So it doesn't do the ... read more and find out. It actually gives you the summary. And this is important because, as I say, you read the abstract before deciding whether you want to go ahead and spend your time reading all the detail. But the other reason why the abstract is important, and it's a very sad truth, is that many, many times people, especially on the African continent, where the cost of databases is exorbitant, and I've been doing a lot of work in Kenya recently, and I've certainly found that there, a lot of people are reading the abstract only because that's all that they can access. And so they end up, and I think this is a terrible indictment on the injustices of the academic publishing, but that is a topic for another day. But it just shows you that the importance of a powerful abstract. Okay, so I'm going to take you through Kamler and Thompson's description of what goes into an abstract. And then I'm going to ask you to spend, again, I'm only going to give you 5 minutes, which is not much time, but I'm going to get you to try and analyze one of the abstracts that are in front of you in the article of your choice, and to see how the structure that Kamler and Thompson offer us manifests in your field. Because they give us the structure, and I think it's a very useful structure, especially if you're having to write an abstract, but it's also a useful structure to see, well, what does the structure look like in published articles in my field? And they suggest that all abstracts follow 4 steps. Those 4 steps overlap. They look very, very different in the way they manifest in different fields. They might even be in a slightly different order in different disciplines, but they argue that all good abstracts will have all 4 of these steps, not necessarily in this order, not always looking the same, and often overlapping, but here they are. They say that typically it is in this order, but it doesn't have to be. That typically the first thing an abstract does is it gives you the bigger conversation to which this article is contributing. So it tells you the broader field or problem area, the bigger conversation that this article is engaging with. And so I'm writing here as if you are, or they are writing as if you're an author. But as a reader, it's the same thing. You can say, well, what is the bigger conversation that this article is joining? The big debates that are taking place between the experienced researchers in the field that this article is joining. What is the conversation? So that's called locate. It locates it within the field. In the field of ecology, environmental science, English studies, there are many, many, many conversations taking place in your discipline. What particular conversation are they locating this article in? Then they focus in on, okay, well, that's the bigger conversation. What is the specific problem or issue that this article will contribute to? So it starts off saying, here's the big conversation, and this is the specific issue that this paper will address. So it focuses in on that broader location. Then it tells you, what did they do if it's an empirical study? What did they do? What data did they collect? How did they collect it? How did they analyze? What experiment did they do? Even if it is a literary desktop and even a non-empirical study, it will say some kind of outline of, in this article, consideration is given of this theory versus that theory or whatever. So it's a report. It's a report on what happened. And then the fourth, and probably the most important, is here's the contribution. This is the argument. This is what this article does that adds, contributes to that conversation that was focused in on in point number 2. So what does this article argue? Another way of thinking about the word argue could be, what does this article add? What does this article contribute? What is the main take-home message of this article? What are you meant to learn from this article? However you want to say it, there'll be something, a main finding, a main argument, a message that the authors want you to learn from this article, and that'll be in the abstract. So it's locate, focus, report, argue. Right. Oh, sorry, I'm battling with changing page. So it's from Kamler and Thompson, and I've already said that. So I'm just going to very quickly have a look at this example, groundwater arsenic contamination throughout China, and just have a look and see what it might look like, this whole thing. So let me see if I can try and do this without making too much of a mess. Okay, so firstly, it locates it in the bigger conversation. The bigger conversation is about health threats in drinking in China, which were recognized in the 1960s. So it's sort of giving you a geographic context, it's giving you a historical context, and it's giving you the big issue, which is around groundwater and drinking. Then it focuses in on the specific part of that conversation that this article will touch on. However, because of the sheer size of the country, millions of groundwater wells are not tested in order to find out how bad the problem is. So they've taken from the big problem and they're honing in to say that we need testing of groundwater wells. They're focusing in. Then they report on what they did. Sorry, my lines are a bit squiggly there. So they got a statistical risk model, and they have the threshold there. And then they tell you what their main argument is. And their main argument is that a hell of a lot of people, 19.6 million people, are at risk. So their study found that 19.6 million people are at risk, and it identifies arsenic affected areas and highlights the magnitude of the health threat in China. So there we have, located in the big conversation, focus on the specific part of the conversation that this study will contribute to, that this article will contribute to, tell us how the study was done, and then give us the argument. You might, as I say, you might want to call it take-home message or main finding, whatever you want to call it. What I'd like you to do now is to spend, again, I'm sorry about the time frame, but if you can spend 5 minutes just on your own, looking at the abstract of one of the articles you have in front of you and seeing if you can, just by scribbling or highlighting or even just doing it in your mind, if you can see, it might not be neatly in this order, but if you can see, identify the locate, the focus, the report, and the argue. Again, I'm going to be quiet for 5 minutes, but if anyone in the room wants to ask Asipe and Neil for help, they are there. And if anyone online wants to put anything in the chat bar to ask me for help, you're welcome to do so. 5 minutes starting now.
Where is the register? That lock that.
Okay, I'm once again interrupting what is hopefully a really useful activity. And as I say, hopefully later in the year, we will do this in a much more hands-on way where you get the opportunity to spend time unpicking the article in more careful detail. But hopefully that was enough of a sense of what you can do with the abstract, which will help you not only start to understand how the article is put together so that when you start producing your own articles, you've got an idea of how it all happens in your field, but also because I think that this kind of meta reading can sometimes also help you make sense of the content. You know, if you are reading about groundwater arsenic contamination, it sort of gives you a sense of how articles put together arguments in your field, and what kinds of arguments are at the forefront of the conversation on your topic. And so this kind of analysis, I do think is worth doing, even if it feels a little bit technical, a little bit, yeah, a little bit technical. I think it is a useful activity for you to do. And to start to really think about that last idea there, this idea that every article makes an argument. It makes, as I say, that word argument can be a problem because it's one of those English, to quote Kwesi Johnson, it's Linton Kwesi Johnson, it's what does he say? English is a bitch, and he's right. Because the word argument is unfortunately an ordinary English word, which means that we disagree with each other, but it's also a word that we use in academia, not necessarily to mean we disagree, but rather to mean that we take a position and we make a contribution. So that word argument means that you've taken a position and made a contribution, and every journal article should take a position and make a contribution. And so it's important for you as you're reading to think of it not just as more and more content that you've got to get in your head, but rather as, well, what is the position that this author's taking? What is the contribution that they're making? Because that's how you come to get a sense of what the conversation in your field is. As I mentioned earlier, your relationship to texts has changed since undergraduate. I would love more undergraduate reading to be about the kind of engagement we're talking about here, but oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes an undergraduate degree is about read this stuff, understand this stuff, maybe memorize some of this stuff, and maybe summarize some of this stuff. So a lot of times at undergraduate level, your relationship to text was you are the student and they are like the teacher or the font of knowledge. So you are the outsider who is doing this somewhat passive act of reading, but not completely passive, but reading just to understand, to memorize, to summarize, and so on. And if that was your experience at undergraduate level, you're going to have to unlearn that now at postgraduate level, because your relationship to the text is so different now. The texts that you're reading are the voices, the conversation in the field. They are the voices of experienced researchers in the field who are having a conversation saying, hey, you know, on this particular issue, there's this particular problem, and this is what I did, and this is what I found. And someone else might say, really? Well, I found this, which is a bit different. Or, yeah, what I found is similar, but in a different context. Now you're reading it not to say, what are those dudes out there saying, those gurus, those experts in the field. Now you're reading it and saying, hey, I'm a novice researcher. I might be standing on the periphery of this circle, but I'm in the room. I'm making knowledge. I'm contributing. So I better get a handle on this conversation. I better kind of make sense on what these dudes are talking about, what their contribution is, what their argument is, what's the cutting edge concepts, what theories are they using. The more I read, the more I'll start to understand all this stuff, because I'm part of this gang now, and I'm going to be putting my own voice out there. I'm going to be making my own knowledge. I'm going to be making my own contribution, and I want to be able to show that I understand what all you guys have been talking about, and I want to draw in some of your works to allow me to say what I want to say. So it's now not about reading to say, I've understood what they've said. It's reading to say, well, how can you help me? I want to read this article. Yeah, well, how's it going to help me? How's it going to relate to my research? What does it teach me that I need to know in order to do my stuff, in order to get on with my contribution? So the relationship is in terms of power, it should be a much more even one. it's you joining a conversation, and like you've just walked into the room and people are having a chat, you listen for a bit and figure out what they're saying, and then you join in. So it's a very different relationship, and hopefully that's what you're starting to get the hang of. So as you start to unpick the abstract, you start to unpick the title, you start to identify what the main argument and contribution is. So you're saying, okay, cool, this is what they're talking about. Help me in what I'm wanting to figure out in the world, my research, what I'm doing. How does it relate to my interests? It's a very different relationship that you have with these texts than being the kind of passive consumer of knowledge. You now should be reading as a potential contributor to knowledge. One of the things you might want to identify is the theory that is being used. And again, there's a video on this in the course, but just briefly, let me just make one or two comments about theory. I would suggest that for some of you, particularly humanities and social sciences, and the social sciences includes the commerce faculty, the law faculty, the education faculty, some of the pharmacy faculty, that what you are doing when you use theory is you're putting on a pair of glasses and you're saying, I don't want to just look at this world, the social world, because most of you are looking at the social world. I want to make sense of the social phenomena just through my everyday eyes. You know, I'm a master's student, Black male South African, or I'm a PhD student, a white PhD student from Italy, you know, that you're just looking at the phenomenon through your eyes with all your own experiences and bias and so on. You're actually putting on a pair of specialized glasses when you do research. You're saying, well, what might this theory, this understanding of the phenomenon, this explanation of the study, of the topic, what does that theory, that pair of glasses allow me to see? And most articles in the humanities and social sciences will actually spell out, sometimes in the methods section, sometimes in the introduction, but they'll spell out what pair of glasses they're using, what angle, what position they're taking. Is it a Marxist position? Is it an African feminist position? Are they using legitimation code theory? Are they using consumer demand theory? So they will often actually say, these are the lenses I'm using to look at this particular phenomenon and my data in a very specialized way, and they spell out what those lenses do for them. Now, in fields, in many, not all, but in many fields in the natural sciences, you still have theories, you still have explanations for the world, but these are so assumed and shared that you might not even need to mention them. So, for example, if you're reading an article about a chemical compound and how it is being, I don't know, I'm going to show the very quick limits of my knowledge. But if you're talking about the building of a particular chemical compound, you're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time saying, oh, you know, I'm taking this position, or I'm using that theory, because we all in that field would share our understanding of what chemicals are, of how the world is made, of how compounds come to be. So you don't have to spell out that this is based on the work of the 17th century, whatever, and the 18th century. And then you might do a bit of a literature review saying the most recent work in the area, but you're not going to necessarily take a theoretical position explicitly. There is still a theoretical position. There is still a general understanding of how the world works, but it's so shared that you probably don't need to spend the energy reading up on it and articulating it. But those of you who are doing something in the humanities and social sciences, you, generally speaking, in any piece of writing, have to articulate the position from which you're writing and the theoretical lenses that you are wearing when you make sense of the data. So that's another activity I'd like you guys to do, unfortunately, in your own time, but to try and identify what is the theory in this article and how is it being used. It might be a kind of analytical theory, which allows them to make sense of the data. It might be a bigger theory that helps them make sense, explains how the world works. So make a note for yourself to identify the theory. And you'll find a video in the section on the online course called Additional Materials. which is full of materials, additional short videos and so on. I urge you to dive right in and have a look around, but in particular on this issue of identifying the theory, the lenses, the glasses that you put on to do a piece of research, and to identify the theories that are being used in the articles you read. I think you will find this little video useful. What is theory? It's a short little video, and I really think it's useful. I think that identifying theories is quite an important thing to do if you're doing research in the humanities and social sciences, because some theories kind of bash up against each other. They're such different understandings of the world that if you're just reading one article after another and you don't start to identify, hang on, these guys actually they're not in the same conversation. They might be talking about the same topic, but they're kind of talking in different groups. And sometimes by starting to try and identify the theory, you can start to map out. And if it sounds like I'm talking about some weird mystical code, don't worry. This stuff doesn't come easily. It takes practice, but you will get there. And yes, I'm just picking up a comment from the chat bar here. Judith saying that she's working across disciplines. And that, for those of you doing multidisciplinary studies, there's a lot of multidisciplinary work and transdisciplinary work happening, which is really powerful space to allow new knowledge to emerge, particularly because it forces us to work outside of our lane, so to speak. Because if you've been inducted in a particular theory, you've got those glasses firmly on your face, you see the whole world through those lenses. Your lenses can allow you to see things in very specialized ways, but sometimes they can be a pair of blinkers. And sometimes you need to be forced to put on other people's glasses to see things a bit differently. So it's a challenge, but I think it's worth doing. And that's why it's worth reading whatever you can on your topic. And those people working in fields where theoretical positions and methodologies are more contentious, which is some parts of the natural sciences, some parts of pharmacy, but certainly humanities and social sciences, I urge you to read across methods, across theories, and across the people who say the stuff that you disagree with. If you find articles that make you irritated and angry, that's like gold, because then you can pause and say, why is this annoying me? Why do I disagree with that? And that can help you to either craft an argument against their position or perhaps to challenge your own. So when you find something that annoys you, ask yourself why. Is it because of a particular stance they take, which might help you rethink your own stance? Or is it just because they write really badly, in which case it might help you to write better? Right, so I keep talking about this idea. I've spoken a little bit about this idea of theory and saying that it's more explicit in some fields than others. But I would like to suggest that all fields, the contribution you make is an argument. And as I said, the word argument is confusing because in English it means one thing, and in the university it means another thing. By the way, theory is the same. Theory in English means the opposite of what it means in the university. Theory in English means a guess, an idea. Oh, please, man, that's just a theory. That's her theory. I don't believe that. That's just some stupid theory. So theory in the world out there is kind of an idea, a guess, a position that someone might take, but others might argue with. Whereas theory in the academy, in the university, basically means a tried and trusted explanation. It doesn't mean it will be there forever. It doesn't mean that some people don't disagree with it, but it's something, it's not an idea, it's not a guess, it's not a hypothesis. It's an explanation that of a particular phenomenon or of a particular topic that has been tested, it has been researched, and it's a useful pair of glasses. It's a pair of glasses that allows us to see something in powerful ways. So theory means the opposite in the academy. An argument is also like that. Argument means something out there, bad, fighting, negative, whereas inside the academy, argument means contribution. Take a position, make a contribution. The word thesis, and I find this quite interesting. My master's was in linguistics. So I always love looking at the history of words. The word thesis, if you look it up, it's got two meanings. The first meaning is a dissertation, a lengthy piece of work, which makes a contribution to the field. Great. So that's what you guys are working on. You're working on a dissertation, a thesis, a lengthy piece of writing that makes a contribution to the field. That's the first meaning of the word thesis. Second meaning of the word thesis is an argument. That is what thesis means. It means an argument in the academic sense of the word. So that's what the word thesis means. It means to take a position and make a contribution. to build knowledge and contribute it to the field. That's what an argument is. So don't think if your supervisor is saying, where's your argument? They're not saying you have to get nasty or fighty. They're saying you need to be clear about what is it that you're contributing? What is it that you're saying, and how, and what will that allow your reader to understand? What is the take-home message? What is the contribution? And that's what I'd like you to do next. And again, I'm so aware of time. We're rapidly running out of time. We've got 10 minutes left. You're not going to be able to do this now, but I would like you to go through and find out where the argument is. Typically, this argument, the central message, the take-home contribution, is mentioned a few times in the article. It's usually there in the abstract, as we already saw. It's often there in the introduction. In this article, I will argue that, or it can be seen as will be exposed or explained. That, so often in the introduction. And then in the conclusion again, it'll say, this is what you need to know, dear reader. This is what I hope you've learned from my article. And then the whole body of the article, whether it's literature review, methods, findings, discussion, all of that stuff is the way of building this argument so that you find it credible and you keep it with you. There are some videos on this which will help you. You will find them all in that extra additional materials. There's a video called Crafting an Argument, which I think is worth watching. There's a video called Thesis Means Argument, which I think is worth watching. And then there's one called Thesis Statement, which is basically your argument in one sentence. Building an argument, I'm really rushing now, I do apologize. Remember, as I said earlier, your relationship to text has changed. You don't need to tell us what's in the writing. Whoever reads your thesis, whether it's your supervisor, your examiners, your readers later out there, whoever reads it, you don't need to tell them what's in the literature, because they can read it themselves. And I hate to say it to you, but you are a novice researcher. Chances are they said it better anyway. So you don't need to sum up what's out there. And maybe some of you, your undergraduates taught you, your undergraduate studies sort of taught you, read and summarize. But now what you need to do is you tell us stuff. You tell us, you make claims, you tell us what it's like, what's going on in your topic, what are the key concepts, you tell us about them. Don't let other people tell us, you tell us. But we won't just believe you. So you need to have references that will substantiate. So you tell us what a concept means, you tell us what the methods are, you tell us about your findings, but use your references to show how what you are telling us is backed up by this credible peer-reviewed references. Now, a lot of people will tell you that we reference to avoid plagiarism. Now, I'm sure that that's important. And of course, there's another whole issue about plagiarism we will be talking about later in the year. But quite frankly, if you speak to any highly published academics and ask them, why did you have this reference over here? What is this reference over here doing? And you go through their article, they will not mention plagiarism, because that is not why they're putting the references in there. And that is very important for you to understand. Academic authors don't reference to avoid plagiarism. That is a very important positive spin-off of referencing. They reference for all sorts of other reasons, like they want to make sure that when they say something, their readers will believe them. So they give them in brackets some references to show that there's other research that has done this. They reference to show the body of work that they're contributing to. They reference to map out the up-to-date conversations to which they are contributing. They reference to give kind of breadcrumbs so that the person the reader who really wants to find out more can follow up the references and go and read even more detail. That's why we reference. So we reference to substantiate our claims, to position our work. We draw on that literature to build our argument. We don't just say, this person said this, that person said this, that person did this study, this person did that study. I can go and read all of that myself. Don't tell me what they've said. Tell me what you want me to understand. And when you do this with your article, you'll be able to see how the articles do that. And if you can start to understand how other people have done these chains of claims and evidence, you will be able to do it yourself. So here's just an example. Oh, darn it, sorry. Here's just an example of a fact that each journal article has one big argument, one big contribution, but it might have to make a whole lot of smaller arguments, and each smaller argument it might make up by the author claiming something, not telling us about what some other guys wrote about. The author says, this is what the world is like, this is what this phenomenon is like, this is what this concept means. And then they give us evidence for that claim, usually in the form of references, often in the form of references. So I'm rushing ahead. Sometimes you can make claims, especially in the natural sciences. Often the only references are in the literature review, and then they just tell the methods, they just say what they did. They don't have to say why they used this piece of technology or why they waited this many minutes or whatever, because those kind of claims are accepted in the field. But even in the humanities and social sciences, there's certain claims you can make. Mozart was born in Vienna. You probably don't need to have a reference for that because that's established and people in the field know that Mozart was born in Vienna. Sometimes you can make a claim later and refer back to earlier evidence. Okay, so why do we reference? I've already discussed some of that. Please, in the additional materials, you'll find this video, how to avoid plagiarism or why we reference in academic writing. Please, please, please go and give that a view because I think it shares some useful information, because if you think that we reference only to avoid plagiarism, you will not learn how to write properly. You need to understand that the primary reason we reference are, and I've written that list there of 12 reasons we reference, and I put avoiding plagiarism as number 10. So watch that video and I unpack some of those ideas in that video. It's in the additional materials. I'm not going to go through these. I've run out of time. Just a quick example now of an activity that I really would love to do with you if we had the time, and I'm going to urge you, set aside an hour or two tomorrow to follow up on today's workshop, to watch the videos and to do these tasks. This particular task I call the 2 highlighters task, and I honestly think it is one of the most useful tasks that you can ever do to become a better reader and a better writer in your field. Basically, you need a hard copy of the article and you need 2 different colored highlighters. And with the one highlighter, highlight every time the author makes a claim. Every time the author says, this is true, this is what it's like. And then with the other highlighter, highlight the evidence that they provide for that claim. And then you'll get a sense of what things can authors just say and expect the reader to believe them, and what kind of claims do they make and then have to give you evidence, and what form does that evidence take? Does it take is it a reference? Is it a quote from the data? Is it some statistics? How are they getting away with making these claims? How are they convincing me as a reader that I should believe this claim? What evidence are they providing? So you've got 2 highlighters. You highlight the claim in one color and the evidence in another. So very, very quickly, here's an example. I'll just go through 2 examples. This is one example from one kind of text. Traditional methods of teaching in most school classrooms involve spoken word as the primary mode of communication. On average, up to 60% of classroom learning activities involve either listening or participating in verbal communication with the teacher or other learners. They're making a bold claim there. And I might read it and go, really? Who says? Oh, brackets, Sutherland and Loveman, 2001, page 2. And then they go on and make another claim, which means that the better the learner can hear, the more she is able to learn. Oh, really? What's the link between learning and hearing? Oh, Smith. If I want to find out more about it, read Smith. So there you go. We've got claims and we've got evidence. Here's another example. The use of maggot debridement therapy in South Africa has gained interest in the past decade. Williams et al., Duplessis and Pretorius, blah, blah, blah. The identification of the maggots used for this therapy remains an issue, as most medical doctors are not trained in entomology to correctly identify flies. Lucilla sericata is the most commonly used species, but is most often misidentified as Lucilla caprina. The 2 species are also often used in forensic entomology. I think you've got the hang of this. What I would do now is with my one highlighter, I'd highlight all the claims, and with my other highlighter, I'd highlight what evidence is this author providing to make sure that the claims are taken seriously. So I would strongly urge you to undertake this activity. Here's one more example. Photodynamic therapy is a promising method for treating different types of diseases and has been used in ophthalmology, oncology, dermatology, and cardiovascular diseases. PCs and their metal derivatives have found application in many areas, etc., etc. Lots of claims being made there. Where's the evidence for those claims? Why should I believe this author who's telling me all these things? Who says? Who says? They're not giving me data to show that they've proven this in their laboratory. So why should I believe them? Well, in this case, it's these tiny little 1, 2, and 6, 7. It's a different form of referencing, But if I followed up on the reference list and I found reference number 1 and number 2 and reference number 6 and 7, I could read up further, and at the bottom there, 8 and 9. And presumably those references are good, up to date, peer-reviewed references. So now I'm likely to take these set of claims in gray seriously, because this person's, they're making the claims themselves, but they're doing it by using good, strong references. In all of these cases, person's done good writing in all 3 examples, because it's the author making the claims. They're not handing over the microphone and just saying, this other person did this study, this person found this person says this. Instead, it's the author saying, this is what it's like. You don't believe me? Here's some evidence. Here's an example, I think, of fairly bad writing, which is not bad writing if it was just one paragraph, but if the whole article was like it, it would be bad writing. So let me make that very clear. This is from a published article, and there's nothing wrong with this paragraph if it's not like this throughout, but I'll read it first to make sense. Dundre and Gosling note that in higher education, there are paradoxical pressures to engage in disciplinary research and publish, while at the same time, there is increasing political and public interest in teaching and learning. They are going to say, in practice, we have a tension between the rhetoric of valuing teaching, enhancing the status of teaching, and rewarding excellent teachers, and the reality, which continues to suggest that teaching is very much a lower priority, subservient to research and income-generating activities. Nothing wrong with this paragraph if the rest of the article was more in the similar vein to the previous example. But if the whole article or the whole thesis or the whole chapter was just telling me about other people's studies, I would say, where are you, dear author? What do you think? What do you want to tell me about? Because this article tells me about Dundre and Gosling. What they said, it even, in inverted commas, hands the microphone over to them and lets them speak through a direct quote. And I know from this paragraph quite a lot about some other article, but I still don't know what you, the author of this piece, had to say. So, in fact, the only little bits that the author has made is very few and far between. Final points. Over time, guys. Thanks for staying with me. I've got 5 minutes left. I'll make it quick. When you select what to read, do it sensibly. It's not a simple activity. Do a proper search. Tomorrow lunchtime, you'll learn about database searches, especially for those off campus. Read the abstract before you download, call it by a sensible name. Make sure you do all your required reading, but go beyond the required reading. Those people that succeed in postgraduate studies and fly ahead, and I'm speaking especially to the honors students here, if you want to shine, don't just do the required reading. In the UK, they don't talk about studying for a degree. They talk about reading for a degree. I'm reading philosophy. I'm reading history. And in a way, I think that's useful because you are joining a conversation. So a lot of your time needs to be reading to figure out what the conversation is about. So don't just do the required reading. If you want to know how to get a PhD scholarship, read. Keep a reading journal. Do more reading than you possibly need to. Identify credibility. Get a sense of who are the key theorists in your field, what are the key journals in your field, what constitutes a credible time frame in your field. Maybe you even want to look at, if an article keeps being referenced, if every time you read an article, you find some other article being referenced, you should probably go and read that article. How current is it? How up to date? Key sources, notice what names and references keep coming up over and over again. You probably need to read them. This is a bit of advice. I found I had to creep up on heavy theorists. If I come across a new theory, let me use critical realism as an example. I feel comfortable reading critical realism by the actual gurus in the field now. But when I first started reading it and I tried to read Bhaskar, I was like, I am an English first language speaker. I don't understand what this dude is talking about. I don't understand any of it. Even the sentences, a single sentence didn't make sense to me. It's like I understand all the words, don't understand the sentence. So I had to creep up on Bhaskar. And I did that by reading the Wikipedia pages. I did that by watching YouTube videos. I did that by reading the theory chapter from some PhD theses that had used it. I read some journal articles that had used Bhaskar. And finally, I understood enough to go and read the main dude myself. If you are like that, like me, you might want to creep up. YouTube is wonderful. Not a good reference point because it hasn't been peer reviewed, but often you can find, and of course you've got to be aware that sometimes people put rubbish on YouTube videos and they haven't understood the theory themselves, but often it's quite a useful way. Eventually, though, you do have to use the key text. If there is a big name in your field, you might creep up on that big name, but you probably have to end up reading it. Concept notes, maps, and free writing, that's all in that video. Last, but very much not least, reading and writing in the academy are social practices. They emerge out of the histories of the discipline. They are not a set of skills that you have or you don't have. They are things that we all acquire with time and get better and better and better at. I find it much easier to read and write in my field now than I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I am still, however, learning and finding it easier and easier as I go. And every time I sort of shift fields or theories, I have to step back a little bit and build up those muscles again. Don't be hard on yourself. If you're reading stuff, you think, I don't know what the flip's going on, find another way in, but you've got to keep at it. You've got to keep reading and you've got to keep writing. Unfortunately, it is a practice. And the only way to get good at a practice is to practice. You wouldn't go and run a marathon if you didn't do any training. And then my last thing I always say to my own students, for every reading, there must be a writing. It doesn't have to be fancy academic writing for your supervisor, for your thesis. It can be scribbled notes for yourself where you're just saying, what the heck did I just read? I don't understand what these words mean. I better look this up. But if you've done a reading, do some writing, because even that informal writing to yourself is fundamental to the process of learning to become a good writer. I'm sorry that was so rushed and garbled, but those of you who know me know that I always end up apologizing for being rushed and garbled. But I am hoping that we will have a longer workshop on this later in the year, and there are lots and lots of videos on this stuff on the RU Connected site. Thank you so much for your very, very precious time. And yeah, keep well. Happy reading and writing.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
I can see a message here from someone who's still busy trying to register. Don't wait to register. Follow that self-enrollment URL, tinyurl.com/ in capital CPGS 2023. I think you'll be able to self-enroll. You can email us if you don't manage. Bye. Bye, Asipe. Thanks for your help as always.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.